Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. Merry Christmas! Today is the 12th day of Advent, and I have a special guest. Let's Read is joining me today. This is, I think, the first time he's been on my channel. I know I've been on his channel a couple times, but we are going to read cryptid stories. I hope y'all are having a good Christmas day, and many of you are probably cooking and listening to this at the same time and, working or... Okay, let's get to these stories. Number 1. When I was really young, I was in the car with a friend, and out of the rearview window, I saw a set of large, glowing purple eyes that almost looked like cat eyes. I tried to get my friend's attention, but they didn't see them. When they looked around, eyes disappeared. But as we were driving away, I spotted them in the rearview mirror again. I couldn't see any face. I couldn't see any features other than those large purple eyes when I turned around. To see how close, like whatever had those eyes, was sitting on the trunk of my friend's car, just staring at me. I couldn't see a body, and to this day, I don't know if I was hallucinating. Number 2. When I was about 9 years old, I was outside on a misty October night at around 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. There was a full moon or almost a full moon, but it was all cloudy, so the sky was kind of dark brownish gray. It's hard to describe the exact color, but I'm sure a lot of you know what I mean. Dark, but you can still see. If it wasn't for the fact that the sky wasn't pitch black, I would have seen this. Anyways, I was bouncing on my trampoline and all of a sudden, I caught a glimpse of something flying towards my house, just barely over the trees. I looked up as it got closer, and for lack of better ways to describe it, it turned out to be a huge creature with a body kind of like a wide beetle and a giant squid head combined. The creature's head was really small compared to its massive body. It had 4 pointed tentacles on each side of its body. It didn't have wings. It just hovered right over me at maybe 20 to 30 miles per hour. Pretty fast, but slow enough for me to make out the creature. Couldn't see its eyes or any detailed features besides the pointed ends of its tentacles. Just the black silhouette as it flew over. It didn't bother me at all, and I'm not sure it even saw me. Obviously, I went inside after that and didn't go out to play at night for a long time. Has anyone else seen something like this? And if you had an interaction with it, what was it like? Luckily, the creature was only over my yard and house for a second as it flew over. But I feel like I dodged a missile that night when I look back at it now. Number 3. A friend of mine in Brazil had seen a strange creature we were yet struggling to identify. They saw it out of their kitchen window. It was climbing their wall, getting out of the house's perimeter, and was only seen for a few seconds. My friend described it as a slim with almost humanoid shape with white skin or thin fur. It was big as an adult person. They live in a pretty small city and recently moved into their old house near the town's graveyard. There are various reports from the town's folk of a similar creature that tries to climb over the cemetery walls, only to fall back inside again. My friend also claims to have seen it once. We have done extensive research, and there aren't any similar or big enough animals in the area that could be what we saw. I wonder if anyone with more experience has some insight that can help us with solving this mystery, since it disturbs my friend to this day. Number 4. I had this old man telling me the story of a cryptid. He called them tree people and described them as long, lanky humanoids made of roots, moss, and other foliage. That secret and sweet and acid-smelling sappy substance. He said that they can climb into things through their mouths and puppet them after consuming their souls. That they only possess things that feed on other things. He said he swears that him and a buddy went out hunting one summer when he was like 19, and they saw this deer chewing just above the grass, not actually eating anything, just chewing on air. And that the eye they could see was looking directly at them, and they're blind, a little ways off. The eye was unnatural for a deer, mostly white with a ring of very pale blue and a large pupil. The other hunter was freaked out a little and wanted to leave. So they packed up, but when they exited the blind, the deer was closer, just chewing and staring. He said the other hunter couldn't stop staring at the thing, and it wasn't running, so he approached it. When the hunter got close enough to touch it, a long, sticky black arm slowly stretched out of the deer's mouth and started to caressing the guy's face. The dude who told me the story, the other hunter hit the ground after being touched and started convulsing while the thing kept climbing out the deer and touching the dude. He said he shot at the deer like 2 or 3 times and it ran off. He got his buddy to the hospital and he ended not remembering anything, and the doc said he had some freak seizure. What do y'all think? Weird old man telling corpse skis, or is it a cryptid? Number 5. So it's been over a year and I still think about this to this day. I'm new to Reddit. This will be my second post and I have no idea what subreddit I should post this to. I'm Native American and I believe in a lot of Native American folklore like stick Indians, skinwalkers, the goat man. I grew up listening to elders tell me stories about them, but I have never heard of a story about a dancing dog. So back when I was in a toxic relationship, I was arguing with my boyfriend at night. I was outside his house, and I ended up walking home crying. He lived pretty far from my house, so the walk was at least 20 to 30 minutes. I was crying until I made it to the street that wasn't too far away from my house. I crossed some train tracks, and out of the bushes, I saw a giant wolf walk in front of me. It scared me so bad that I stopped crying and I started to panic. Once I realized I was fine, I continued walking. I only took maybe 10 steps before I heard a growl in my ear. It was loud. I decided to ignore it and put my headphones in and told myself I was almost home and that would be okay. Now I'm 2 blocks away from my street and there's a dim street light that's at the end of my street that I could see. And as I was walking, I saw a dog walking into the light of that street light. Then it stands up on its 2 back legs and dances into the woods. Its paws go up and down like it was a dance it was doing at this point. I'm so scared I run as fast as I can. I make it to my street, scared it was going to come out of those woods and get me. But it never did. The whole reason I'm writing this now is to know if anyone has ever heard of a dancing dog. Only thing I can think of is that it was a skinwalker. Number 6. I grew up in West Jefferson, Ohio, which is a rural village just outside of Columbus to the west. In the summer of 2009, I was about to start my freshman year of high school. I used to play in the woods towards the edge of the village by the old New Hampton cemetery. My friend and I would hop the gates and crawl under the barbed wire fence where it was cut, giving us enough room to low crawl underneath it. Beyond this, there were acres of woods and a water treatment plant, as well as a creek that ran through. One day, I went out enjoying nature in those woods, when suddenly I got a deep sense of dread. I didn't see anything suspicious, but something in my gut was telling me to get the hell out of the woods. I noticed around this time that it was completely silent, and I could no longer hear the birds. I sprinted out of the woods as fast as I can, crawled back to the other side of the fence and into the cemetery, where my friend and I had left our bikes. He had been with me and ran with me out. When we got to our bikes, we noticed two glowing yellow orbs that looked like eyes in the tree line we had just exited. We rode our bikes home and never spoke about it again. Can anyone help me identify what they think this could have been? For reference, we don't really have any predators in central Ohio. It could not have been a bear, and we don't really have wolves. The yellow orbs were eye level, so with how high up off the ground they could not even be a coyote. Also, I know running like that was the stupidest thing I could have done. I know this now, but back then I didn't know cryptids were a thing. Number 7. Hello everyone. I don't know if my encounter matches this community, but I really don't know where else to ask. It's not much. When I was 12, I was outside in the garden because I tried to learn a handstand on the grass. We lived in a rather small village in a really rural area in Germany. It was late summer, beginning of autumn. I felt watched, super creeped out after a while. And I remember a human looking thing sitting unnaturally on the roof of our neighbor's house. It wasn't our neighbor, and yes, it looked human, but in a really uncanny valley way. If I remember right, this thing played a flute. The weird thing is that it was away so fast. I remember being so terrified and scared to look at it, and I went inside really fast and quiet. When I checked later, it was gone. My parents also had no clue what I saw. To this day, I remember it really vivid, and I still get creeped out. Anyone please help me? Number 8. For context, this occurred in the summer of 2018, around late July. At the time, I was an intern working with the Forest Service. My general duties include trail maintenance and patrolling areas to interact with the public and make sure nothing was out of place. We often did this in teams of 2 to 3, but there were occasions where we had to conduct it solo. This wasn't a big deal for me, as I had a decent amount of backcountry experience already, with some of it being solo. I got the word that I needed to go do a day patrol up to the Alpine Lake. Simple there and back about 8 miles total, just to check trail conditions and interact with anyone in order to show presence. First 2 miles up are in a relatively open valley, a moderate stream flowing through it, with waist-high vegetation and a couple of scree fields. As you work your way higher in the elevation, you reach the tree line around the lake. To this day, I haven't experienced a feeling quite like I felt that day. The only thing I can think to describe it as if you were being around someone who really didn't want you there. The air was perfectly still. I didn't hear a single thing. I just felt aggression. I felt so uncomfortable that I ended up not eating lunch because I didn't want to stop for too long. Anyways, I finished my patrol and leave kind of kicking myself for freaking myself out too bad. Flash forward a couple weeks later, and I get told to go back for a 2-day patrol so that I have time to make trail improvements by camping at the lake. So I go back out, and this time I don't get the same vibe, affirming that it might have been all in my head. That night, I pitched a tent and go to sleep. Around 2-ish, I wake up because I feel my tent shaking. When I roll over a little, the tent shakes more violently. I'm terrified, white knuckling my knife and bear spray when it just dead stops. No noise. Nothing. I stay up till sunrise and check around my tent and find nothing out of the ordinary. Needless to say, I packed up and got out of there, wondering if anyone else had a similar experience.
In the summer of 2013, I decided it was time to kill coyotes for that sweet, sweet fur. I grabbed my bare bones basic AR-15 that I got for cheap. I like the way an AK slings a fix, so I ghettoed a sling point to put on the barrel. I slung it on my right side around my neck, messenger bag style, and took my ATV up to a cabin on the mountain. Upon arriving, I took the key to my ATV and started looking around. I had been throwing squirrel and rabbit guts into the woods to attract predators. Checking my bait, I found it all gone, and a strange feeling persisted. The guy who lives on the mountain just down the road left in his car just as I decided that I should look around in the woods. Every time I stepped, I kept thinking that I heard another footstep shuffling through the grass and brush. I saw a stick-figured shape thing at a distance a little bit down the hill from me, and I sort of waved at it, and it slipped behind a tree. I thought, okay, goodbye, and walked back to the cabin, deciding to sit around and just drink for a while. I started hearing coyote yelps and stuff in the distance, so I got my gat ready to blast a couple of fools. I sat with the lights off on the porch, but nothing came by. Then the yelping turned into a distant, "Help me." I looked over to the neighbor's house, and the lights were off. It didn't click that he left, and I got up and listened. "Help me. Help me." I thought, oh God, he broke his leg and is stuck in the woods with coyotes or something. I got close enough into the woods to tell that it was on an ATV trail, and I decided to take my ATV and AR, driving towards the person saying help me when I came to a U-shaped dip in the path. Without hitting my brakes, I just coasted down it. I heard something right in front of me on the trail scream, "Help me," and I freaked out trying to turn. I ended up flipping my ATV, and I can't really remember, but I blacked out for a minute and woke up under the ATV with it pinned on top of me. I sat still and waited for my eyes to adjust before feeling around. My left leg was pinned under the ATV, and I tried pushing it, but I couldn't get it off. It's like I got 100 pounds heavier in a couple of seconds. The sling around my neck told me that I still had a rifle. I dragged it to me, realizing my arm was bleeding in the meantime. I checked over the gun. The handguard was messed up and the stock was cracked, but it appeared to still be functional. I've got 30 rounds to keep me safe until the night's over or someone finds me. And I sat and listened closely to the sounds of the forest before I heard something shuffling in the grass. That silence is everything. It's dead quiet, and I don't think I've ever felt more fear than I have in this moment. I heard it shuffling around. "Help me. Help me." I didn't know if I should respond or just sit in silence. Its shuffling got closer and something appeared over the ATV, like if you had fallen at a bar and the bartender sort of looked at you funny. This thing looked like it was 9 feet tall, frozen solid. I twiddled my fingers, reaching for my gun, brought it to my shoulder, and sat there pointed at whatever this thing was. I didn't want to look at it because I just felt so much fear. "Help me." I heard it again. I heard it climbing over the ATV. I looked away, but something grabbed my face. My mind went completely blank, looking for the trigger, but I couldn't find it. Slowly it moved my head over, and I was face to face with this thing. It looked like how almost everyone describes them, a golem that had done crack, carved up its face with sunken cheeks and deep eyes. To this day, I've never smelled anything quite as bad as the breath from that thing. I felt the flash hider on my AR bump into something, and I remembered that I had it aimed at the thing. My brain rebooted, and I screamed as loud as I could. It screamed back. I started yanking, not pulling or squeezing the trigger as fast as I could. The gun was going off and my ears started to ring. It grabbed my hair and started slamming my head into the ground as fast as it could, still pulling the trigger as fast as I could. It ripped the gun from my hand and started beating me with it. It was still screaming as loud as it could while beating me over the head with my own gun. Lights started flickering through the woods. I was about to black out when I heard something louder than the screaming. I swear I saw the thing's head fly open. I dropped my gun, screamed like a child that had just been shoved into an oven, and ran for it. My gun was dropped 10 feet from my head and the light was getting closer. I didn't know if I was dying or being saved. Somebody started screaming my name, telling me to hold on. Something was tugging my arm. I looked over, and it was the guy who lived down the road. He had a huge revolver, a Magnum Research BFR. At that moment, I just blacked out and woke up in a hospital with a ton of stitches in my head. When I eventually got out, I asked my neighbor what he saw that night, and he just replied, "A bear. We get them often up here." I'm not entirely convinced that I was nearly beaten to death with my own gun by a bear. I don't really have an explanation for what happened. I have ideas, but here's the story. I'm a freshly graduated high school student on my way to college. During my senior year, I had a job working for my grandfather as a farmhand, more or less a farm manager. He would give me instructions on what to do on the farm without him being there, most commonly feeding the cows. It was early November, and at this time, baseball practice started after school and would last from 3:25 to 5:30. By that time, the sun was almost down when I arrived at work and started getting ready. One day I had gotten dressed, filled up the buckets, and fed the first farm when I realized that I didn't have a key to the other farm. Frustrated, I was forced to pick up 2 buckets at a time and walk them from the fence to the feed trough, a good 40-yard walk. While walking, I was trying to keep myself upbeat and just started to whistle. No real pattern or tune, just something that I came up with. When I came back and put the last buckets in the bed of the truck, I heard something from my neighboring property. It was whistling. Strange, I thought, as no one lives anywhere near that property and it sounded very close. I rationalized it was a mockingbird or something and just kind of went on with my life. The next couple of days I didn't whistle, but the whistling continued. Slowly over those few days it got clearer and clearer until it sounded like regular whistling. Eventually it got louder. When I first heard it, it was very faint. I almost missed it over the crunching of me walking to my truck. In the last few days, I kind of became accustomed to the whistling and kind of expected it. When one day it didn't come, I was a little disappointed. This time I had brought the key and walked up to the gate and started fiddling with my keys when I dropped them into the grass. I said, "Damn it," when I dropped them. I squatted down and started to search for them when I heard a very faint sound coming from the other property. A low groan or gurgle, and it was getting louder. At this point, I wasn't scared but more curious as to what was going on over there. I left my truck parked across from the property and walked a few feet down the road and hopped the fence at the property where I heard the sounds. The land in there goes straight uphill and is heavily wooded all throughout, and the further you go up, the more dense it gets. Looking back now, I made a few big mistakes that could have gotten me hurt. As I walked up the hill, I would occasionally hear the gurgle. It was far up the hill, so still as faint as it was before. As I walked, a bad smell started to hit my nose, a weird mixture of garbage and wet dog or something. I heard something as I was about to crest the hill. "Damn it." A very dry, low, and quite distorted "damn it" came from a couple of yards in front of me. It sounded like a 60-year-old smoker saying "damn it" very slowly, as if they didn't know English or something. I automatically thought someone was on our property, somewhat angry and paranoid now. I started to move slower. I didn't want this guy to hear me before I could see them. I kept going and stopped and listened when I heard another sound. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. This guy was now slowly saying damn it normally, not long and drawn out in that eerie way as if he didn't know English. I sat down on this log, kind of listening, trying to figure out what I should do about this person. He kept saying it over and over, and I noticed his tone was getting higher and his inflection was changing. And it hit me. This guy was perfectly mimicking me. My tone, inflection, literally everything. He even mimicked my frustration when I said it. Angry and kind of scared now, I got up and started to crest the hill. I flicked on my flashlight on my phone. "Hey, this is private property." I was cut off mid-sentence. As I came over the hill, the light barely illuminated this naked figure squatting just a couple of yards in front of me. His eyes were illuminated by the faint glow of my flashlight. I automatically felt that something was wrong. This wasn't a regular person. His neck was longer than normal, and when I came up the hill, he winched his neck and snapped his head to look at me without moving. His eyes were too big, and his head was large and slender. He was squatted in a ballerina-type squat. I looked at his body. He was very skinny. His ribs were showing through his skin. There was a short silence, and, like a robot, the man turned in the leaves and slowly stood with his hands next to his side. I was debating if it was even a person. It was far too tall to be a person. "Damn it," it said in my voice. I turned and sprinted down the hill. It didn't feel like I was running, but more that my legs were just going through the motions. I didn't look back before I got to the fence, and when I hopped it, I got in my truck and sped away. Sadly, I still work at that farm, but I've never told anyone this story, not even my grandfather. I've only heard the whistling a few more times since then. I'm not really a believer in the paranormal, and I really try to find an explanation for weird stuff, and I believe that this may have just been some weird squatter, but I really don't know.
This is the end of day 12 of Advent. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much to Let's Read for joining me today. Please spend some time with family and everyone that's working. Thank you for working on the holidays. I know it can be really hard being away from your family. It means so much for everyone that listens and supports me. And thank you so much for this year. I might take the end of the week off. I'm not sure. But no, either on Thursday or the following week on Tuesday, I will definitely be back. I love y'all so much. Remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross